really fast. Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for being here. We have, I'm going to make just a couple of remarks and sign the bill and make myself available for any questions that you have. And I want to acknowledge that we are here in celebration in Washington, D.C., because we are on the brink of a regional solution that has been just over 40 some years in the making, that will make our transit authority, like other transit authorities across the nation, in ensuring that we have dedicated funding that will ensure Metro safety, reliability, and indeed Metro's future. We are joined today by who we affectionately know in this building as the Mayor of Metro, Jack Evans, also the Ward 2 Council member. We are joined by our Congresswoman, Eleanor Holmes Norton, who has a significant role to play in helping us to protect the federal government's investment and hopefully growing investment in the District of Columbia. Our chairman, Phil Mendelson. Let's give Phil Mendelson a round of applause for joining us today, as well as the DDOT director, Jeff Marudian, our at-large council member for housing, Anita Bonds, the general manager for Metro, Paul Wiedefeld, and the Ward 4 council member, Brandon Todd. So thank you all for being here and being a part of this. We are also joined by members of my administration who have been very focused on making sure that our budget reflects the commitment that I'm talking about. City Administrator Rashad Young, thank you for being here, Rashad. So the council moved on Tuesday an emergency piece of legislation which establishes the WMATA Dedicated Funding Fund. With this fund, the district will provide $178.5 million annually to be a part of the $500 million that Metro needs. That $500 million in new funding from D.C., Maryland, and Virginia will help Metro leverage those dollars for $1.5 billion. Those new funds will ensure, as I mentioned already, Metro safety and reliability. We are very committed to this goal because it makes sure we have dedicated, sustainable, and competitive funding and growth for our system. We know that our city anchors one of the most exciting regions in the entire country, and there are a few things that could hold us back, and congestion is one of them. That's why you have seen so many leaders around the region focused on making sure that the economic engine of our city has what it needs for now and for generations to come. So with that, let me acknowledge Chairman Mendelson and Council Member Evans, and then we will take a few questions. And I'm going to sign the bill first, and then we will take a few questions. Bill.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So good morning to everybody. The real purpose here is to make clear the district's commitment to the regional funding. And I got to say, if you think back a few months, where we are today was not where anybody thought we were going to be. There was a lot of hope and a lot of optimism, but last December, January, particularly January, when the legislatures from Maryland and Virginia got together for their 60-day and 90-day sessions, I have to say I don't quite know how they get business done well in such short time periods, but there was hope, but not a lot of confidence that we would see the three jurisdictions agreeing on $500 million in dedicated funding, but that's what we're seeing. And so what we're doing today is making the point that the district is full on. We've got this legislation the mayor's about to sign. I'm not quite sure why we don't do bill signings when I sign, but I guess it's because I'm sitting alone in my office signing the bill. But that's the point here. And you want to, Jack, if you want to come up next time I do bills, I've got about 20 in my office right now. You're welcome to come by. And but that's the point here, is that the three jurisdictions have come together on this. And I want to acknowledge Chuck Bean, the executive director of the Council of Governments, because COG has been in the thick of this. since, I don't know if it was last year or the year before last, convening legislators from the 3 states and representatives from the executives and trying to work out the issues. And believe me, if you think that this is just about $500 million and how you divide it up, there are a lot more details involved, a lot more. And the Council of Governments has been very helpful in convening everybody and keeping those conversations going. So thank you, Chuck. And thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, and good morning, everyone. Good morning. This is a historic occasion. I'm pleased to join with our mayor, our chairman, our Congresswoman, Eleanor Holmes Norton, the general manager of Metro, and everyone else who's up here and in the audience on what is a tremendously historic occasion. I would say this is the most important thing that's happened at Metro in the last 40 years since Metro started. As I've always said, Metro had 2 fundamental flaws. One, a 2-track system that keeps us from doing repair work during the day. And so consequently, we're one of the only major systems in the world that has to shut down and do repair work, but it's not fixable. The second fundamental flaw was a lack of a dedicated funding source. The other 5 major systems in America, New York, Chicago, Boston, Philadelphia, and San Francisco, all had a 1-cent sales tax that was dedicated to their system, and we didn't have it. And I was fond of holding up, I didn't bring it today, the study that was done by the Council of Governments, the Federal City Council, and the Board of Trade dated January 13th of 2005 that recommended a dedicated funding source for Metro. So when I became chairman of the board 2.5 years ago, it was my goal to educate the region on what needed to be done. And I want to thank everyone involved. And it starts with our mayor and our chairperson, who really, really did an outstanding job with leadership. Phil over at COG, and the mayor in the region. Eleanor in Congress, when I used to come up and testify, you were the only one who was really with us. And I really appreciate your really standing up for Metro when others didn't. And that was very, very important. Paul Wiedefeld played an enormous role in the last 5 months going down to Richmond. And his credibility about how this was going to work was instrumental in getting Virginia on board. And the elected leadership throughout the region, the 2 governors and members of the houses and senates in their respective states and members of Congress. Everyone really finally got it and pulled together to do something that, as the chairman mentioned, was really unthinkable in January. And so thank you all for doing this. It is not the end, though. And I'm going to finish with this because I always use my Churchill quote, which I will. We still have $10 billion of outstanding liabilities out there that are not funded. The new Roslyn Tunnel that needs to be built, insulating the Red Line that must be done. And those are not funded. We still have a 2.5, well, it's now over $3 billion of unfunded liabilities between our pensions and our OPEB responsibilities. So there are still many, many challenges facing Metro. But as Churchill said after the Battle of El Alamein, in which the British Army for the first time stopped the German army in Egypt, very first time in World War II. Somebody says, is this the end? He said, it's not only not the end, it's not the beginning of the end, perhaps it's the end of the beginning. And that's where I feel we are with Metro. We are now at the end of the beginning. We have a lot of work to do going forward, but today is a day to celebrate a victory for the region that has pulled together and gotten behind the biggest achievement this region has ever done, and that's Metro. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, the Congresswoman to come up, followed by Paul Wiedefeld.
Well, this is a historic day. Since we built this subway, it was one of the very first. It's not the oldest. We're getting what it most lacked, and what it most lacked was a way to get 3 jurisdictions. Understand, it's the only subway where you have to get 3 jurisdictions to do the same thing. That's very difficult to do. The mayor mentioned one issue that I do want to leave you with, and she used the word leveraged, to leverage the $1.5 billion that we have just come to the end of. 10 years of $150 million every year from the federal government that has helped pay for capital costs. Remember, what the council and the mayor are doing today pays for the operations of the metro. What Mr. Wiedefeld has on his plate is humongous, and that is years of neglect of the system. So that he's got to essentially rebuild the system. Therefore, I'm going to need all the help I can get in the Congress to start all over again now that those 10 years are ended, to ask for and somehow get $150 million for the next 10 years. Here's why I think we can do it. The biggest argument on our side in the Congress is the federal government. Are those riders on the weekdays, more of them are federal riders than come to any place else? We're going to have to press that now. And I think, Ms. Mayor, members of the council, you have given us the ammunition, because the region is stepping up to do its part, led by the District of Columbia. It's time for the federal government to do its part. Thank you for what you're doing today.
Thank you. And the Metro's General Manager, Paul Wiedenfeld, can tell us a little bit more specifically about how these funds will be invested.
Thank you, Mayor. Good morning, everyone. First and foremost, I want to thank the Mayor for your leadership. You were proactive from the very start for a number of years on this issue, so thank you so much. And obviously, the Chairman of the Council as well through his efforts at COG. I want to give a special thank, obviously, to the Chairman of the Board for WMATA and Councilman Jack Evans, who has just been tireless on this issue since he's been back at the board and really has led the fight in so many ways. So thank you, Jack, for everything you've done and for the support that you've given me with some very tough decisions we've had to make. So I appreciate that. I did want to thank one group, our group here from the business community, but you're really representing the Metro Now group, is representing riders, advocates, the development community, and so everyone. So I think you've made a huge difference in Annapolis, in Richmond, and obviously here in the district as well. And also, I did not see Jeff DeWitt here, but he's played a central role as well. So I wanted to thank him. We have a lot on our plate, as the chairman of the WMATA board just said. This is just the beginning. We started to roll out some of that yesterday at our board, where we talked about the 8000 series and the new Fairgate system and the mobile app and things like that. So you will see more and more of that as now we have a consistent source of funds that we can start to plan around. So that is what will get us to where we all want to be, to make this system the greatest in the country. So thank you so much.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you so much. I'll get a good picture of this. Down my phone.
Okay, we'll take a few questions on Metro. Yes, can you just acknowledge,
Yes, how you doing today, y'all?
who do you represent?
I represent an individual who has been denied employment by Metro over the last
Okay,
6 years.
we're going to take press questions first, sir.
Metro is allowing individuals with convictions of terrorism, hate crimes, and vehicular homicide under the new policy to get jobs. I have the policy here. I have a nonviolent 17-year-old conviction. I passed the Metro examination. I've been given 2 employment offers in the last 4 years for Metro. I'm told that I can't get a job based on a 17-year-old nonviolent victimless conviction, but they're giving employment opportunities under these policies to individuals who are convicted of hate crimes, individuals who are convicted of terrorism, individuals who are convicted of robbery, assault, burglary. Why can't I get a job? I've passed all the requirements, and they're telling me that I can never get a job, and I'm to be subjected to a lifetime review and denied employment. I understand that it is important to have a safety policy at Metro, but it makes no sense that individuals whose crimes are low risk and pose no risk. Individuals like myself who qualify and need to have a job can't get a job. I've raised my son
Okay,
to
hold on,
graduate
sir. Now,
last year
I've let you,
from high school.
sir, I'm going to
Yes,
ask
Your
you
Honor.
to share with me the information you have. And I think you know our general view is that we want as many people as possible in our city to get second chances. Hold up.
Y'all passed a policy in 2014 instructing
Okay.
Metro to start an employment policy in which they have blatantly ignored by denying individuals.
I'm going to
job
ask, who can take this packet? Okay, Steve has the packet, and we're going to work with you. Any other questions? Yes, sir. Mr. McCartney.
Yeah, Robert McCartney from Washington Post. I have a couple of questions. First of all, are you confident of getting the council's approval for the tax increases that will be necessary to fund the 178.5?
I am. I believe this legislation was passed unanimously on Tuesday by emergency vote of the council. And in all my conversations with members of the council, they certainly recognize that having and funding a safe and reliable metro system is key to how our city and our region can grow. What I also, in my presentation to the council just a few weeks ago, explained our approach in making sure that we that everybody participates in the Metro solution. So out of $178 million, the city administrator really dug in our budget, and we're using about almost $100 million in savings that we found within our budget. So already the taxpayers have stepped up, and more than half of what we need for this new investment was found in our existing budget, which is pretty substantial. We felt strongly, however, that we shouldn't cut sidewalks, roads, and alleys, bridges, and street repairs, very needed infrastructure repairs. So it was necessary that we raised additional revenue. And we did that. We went to three major buckets. We're asking our commercial property taxpayers to pay with additional modest increase to the commercial property tax, over $3 million worth of value. We've also looked to all of people that buy things in the district. Those are our visitors, our employees, and our residents, to also be a part of the solution. And that's why you see a modest increase proposed to our sales tax from 5.75% up to 6%, which would make us competitive also with the region and equal to the region. We also looked to an area, frankly, where we see that the services were not being taxed at the same level as other types of services in the district, and that's with our ride-sharing services. So again, we're proposing an increase there. So out of all those buckets, savings and foregoing some projects from DC taxpayers, commercial property tax, modest increase to the sales tax, and an increase in ride-sharing taxes, that's what makes up the solution. And the reason it was important to me to tap it into each of those buckets is because everybody has to be a part of the solution, and a functioning metro helps our entire economy. Yes.
Chairman, you've been the biggest cheerleader in the region for Metro. And you mentioned, do you think it's not overstating the historic significance of what's going on here?
Am I overstating it? No. I think getting a dedicated funding source for Metro, as the mayor explained, the $500 million leveraging $1.5 billion over the next 10 years is $15 billion. Without that, we were lost. And so it really is the seminal moment for Metro, literally in the last 40 years. By getting this revenue, this enables us to do the needed repair work to get Metro back to be the great system it was. Remember, when Metro opened in 1976, it was revolutionary. People came here to visit Metro. I always use the analogy, it was like the Jetsons. Remember that cartoon? That's what Metro was. It was the Jetsons. And then it fell into a state of disrepair over the last 15 years. Now's the opportunity to fix it. So I can't overstate the importance of getting this done. And again, the second importance, which I kind of went over quickly, The region came together and cooperated on something. And that is something that rarely happens in this region. And I hope it's a template. And I want to take the opportunity again to thank the business community who came together. You know, the Board of Trade, the Federal City Council, the Chamber, and went to the various jurisdictions to get this to happen. The district was easy. We were always on board. Maryland and Virginia were a little more difficult. And thank you for everything you did. And I want to commend the governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan, who came on board, and Governor McAuliffe, and now Governor Northam, who came on board, and the legislatures, everybody. So that's why I think this is a extraordinary moment in the history of the region.
Yes, sir.
I'm Sam Sweeney with ABC7. There's been a sort of an outcry, and some call it on social media regarding this Uber rideshare tax. Can you lay out in layman's terms why it's important for rideshare riders to participate and contribute this additional 3.75%?
It's important for everybody. So you may ask about rideshare. Somebody else may ask, why is it important for somebody who wants to go into one of our retailers and pay a little bit more for a pair of slacks or a pair of shoes? The reason is that we are in need of a solution to a regional problem. We know exactly what it's going to take, and it's important for everybody to participate. So we wouldn't want an additional burden to be placed on the sales tax, for example. So how can we spread that out so we don't have to increase our sales tax by 1%? Instead, we can increase our sales tax by 0.25% and ask our folks who are using rideshare, who are commuters, who are DC residents, who are visitors. It really spreads the base of people who can participate. Yes.
Yeah, one more question. At the beginning of this discussion, the whole debate, there were a lot of calls, especially from the business community, for governance reforms, governance changes, to make sure that the money was going to be spent would be spent wisely and wouldn't make some of the mistakes that have been made in the past. The governance reforms that have been adopted, mainly in Virginia, are not nearly as ambitious or far-reaching as what a lot of people were discussing. Are you concerned about that? I mean, do you think that there's room now we need to sort of continue this process in terms of making governance changes? And what would those
Well, Bob, these changes were suggested by some. I never thought that personally, and the council members can speak to this, that those were the real problem that needed to be solved at Metro. We knew that Metro was an outlier in terms of having dedicated funding so that they could plan for the long term about the capital needs that the system required. Now, obviously, we're not going to turn over this kind of money without the proper oversight, without systems in place to demonstrate to us that the money is being used wisely, without a way to say to Metro, you can't just have a wildly out of proportion budget, that it has to be in line with the needs of this region. And so we will continue to work with our members on the board, with our CFO, so that we are assured of how Metro's annual budget aligns with our expectations of how these dollars are spent. Yes.
I'm going to add just a little bit to that, and that is that, Bob, you're right, that when this debate started, and particularly in Virginia, there was a lot of talk about so-called reform. But Secretary LaHood's report looked at a lot of those issues and came to the conclusion that a lot of the allegations, such as that Metro is paying far more than other systems, that those, what do I want to say, those are myths, and that were not substantiated. So what we're left with is some modest changes that Virginia's recommending, a separate bill in Maryland that I think is reasonable about an inspector general, a stronger inspector general. So we're left with that. But I just wanted to add to what the mayor said, that Secretary LaHood's report went a long way to, I want to say, debunking those
I think that's true, but if I can just follow, Jack Evans called very early on. I think he was the first one to call for shrinking the board, a 5-member board. And there was a lot of discussion in the business community, from the Federal City Council, from the LaHood report. I mean, the one, you're absolutely right, that he debunked a lot of the stuff about labor costs,
Yes.
especially. but he called for that 5-member board. I mean, he said that was a big deal, and that's not happening. There be some limitations on the role of
Well,
aldermen.
I would add that, as I said at the beginning, that in January, nobody believed with confidence that we would end up where we are today. And there were many people who felt that the only way to get to today was through a lot of governance changes. And what we've seen is that the legislatures were willing to step up together with the full funding of $500 million, and that we didn't need to blow up the board, if you will, in order to get there.
Right. Thank you, everybody.
All right, thank you. Good job.
Yes.